Hey there, internet friends, Trevor Starkey here, and welcome to my anime and comic discovery show. This is a show where I take you through my journey discovering anime and comics. As somebody who kind of has missed out on both of those mediums for the most part in my life, I decided I wanted to give them a shot. For this first episode, I'm going to go over an anime that I watched and a comic that I read. I don't know if every week I'll have the time to sit down with one of both, but there will always be at least one of those two elements as a part of this show. So up first on the anime side, I sat down and watched the pilot first episode of Death Note, titled Rebirth. Death Note was recommended to me by my friend Christian Puente at PixelBrave on Twitter. He hit me up before sending out recommendations asking me which shows I liked already in the normal TV sphere to try and kind of fuel his recommendations. He gave me a few, and one of them included Death Note because of my enjoyment and love of the show Breaking Bad. He, I think, correctly identified both shows as following this bad protagonist, but you're always kind of curious to see if he's going to get caught, what's going to happen, how far is he going to go down this path of darkness. And of course, I've also heard Death Note throughout my internet nerd pop culture circles, and it's got the Netflix movie coming up later this year with Willem Dafoe. And having only watched the first episode, I'm definitely intrigued and excited to kind of continue on with the series. I found it on Netflix, dubbed, sat down, watched the first episode, and yeah, they do a really good job of kind of establishing what the series is, I think. So one of the things I really liked was the music of that first episode of Death Note. It felt very Final Fantasy X-esque, with the kind of chanting sounded very reminiscent of the Hymn of the Faith song from that game, and then some of the kind of epic stuff definitely felt like boss battle fight theme music. If you don't know, Death Note follows the journey of a young student named Light as he discovers a book called the Death Note, which is basically a tool of the Shinigami Ryuk. Shinigami here being like a god of death, a Grim Reaper type figure. And the Death Note, you can write any name into that book and the person will die based on the specifications you provide in how they should die. Or if you don't provide a specification, they just die after 40 seconds of a heart attack. The show introduces a pseudo-realistic approach to what would happen if you discovered you had this power, with Light testing it out on kind of a convict that's in the middle of a hostage situation. He kind of blasely throws it off and says, I'm going to write this guy's name down, and the 40 seconds goes by and he assumes nothing has happened, and then, of course, as he goes to turn off the TV, the news report changes to say that all the hostages have been set free and the guy had just fell over, collapsed. We then see him use it one more time while he's out shopping, running errands, something, and he sees a girl under attack by a gang of men. One of them just so happened to exclaim who he is, conveniently. So Light writes his name down, and in this case he writes down the method of death, possibly testing that part of the Death Note. Guy gets hit by a car, girl runs away screaming, saved. And then we cut to 5 days later, where we see the real Light, effectively. Ryuk appears to him, and Light, who has spent the last 5 days frantically writing every bad guy's name that he could, has gone mad with this power, killed hundreds, if not thousands of people, and has basically fallen into this psychosis where he's identified that he will create this new world without villains and without bad people, and he will rule over them as a god. And that element of the show is definitely what took this show from being like, oh, okay, sure, it's nice, to, oh, okay, I'm interested now. So yeah, I really enjoyed Death Note. I'm going to keep with it. It might be kind of a recurring part of this show for the foreseeable future. Thank you to Christian at Pixel Brave for recommending it to me and giving me some rationale behind it instead of just saying Death Note. I'm sure you know that one. You've got to have heard that name. So yeah, looking forward to seeing where Death Note goes. On the comic book side of things, I sat down with Love is Love. Now, if you're unfamiliar, this is an anthology book that came out earlier this year, compiled and organized by Mark Andreyko, who I became a fan of through his efforts and his work on Screen Junkies Movie Fights show. I watch that and I'm a fan of that regularly. And shortly after the tragedy of the Orlando Pulse shootings last year, June, he was on an episode of Movie Fights talking about how he was just announcing that he was getting all these great comic book creators and comic book enthusiasts together to work on this project in honor of and in celebration of and in memory of the Orlando victims. And so even though I wasn't or had no plans of ever like really creating a show like this at the time, I was like, that's something I want to support and I want to get behind. Even though I don't read comics necessarily, I want to go out and support that thing. So when it came out, I bought it, and I paged through a little bit of it at the time, but for this, I went through, sat down, read the entire book cover to cover, and it's got some really powerful stuff. The idea is it is a series of 1 to 2 page stories. So you've got probably 60-ish stories in here. You've got stuff from people like Paul Dini, Mark Bernardin, Patton Oswalt wrote something in here, Mark Millar. Very names I know, even as a non-comic book, fanatic. Names I recognize as both comic book fans, like Patton Oswalt. Taran Killam's got a thing in here, and I know Taran also has a comic. But then you also have, artists and comic book writers extraordinaire that kind of contributed to the anthology. And on multiple occasions, this book brought tears to my eyes in just being able to fantastically tell a heartbreaking, gut-wrenching story in a smidge of panels. Very simplistic art styles at times, very simple storytelling, but very emotional and impactful storytelling. One of the most haunting details I remember coming out of the Orlando Pulse shootings was the idea that when the police and medical examiners were in the club trying to make sense of it all, they were overwhelmed by the deafening sound of phones ringing. The phones of the dead, people trying to reach their loved ones that they hadn't heard from, and nobody being on the other end of the phone to pick it up. And the stories in here that touch specifically on that element, almost without fail, just melted me, punched me in the gut, destroyed me. On the other side, there are incredible stories in here about teaching acceptance and teaching children that it's okay that, a boy has 2 mommies or 2 daddies or something like that. And there is incredible hope within the pages of this book that tomorrow will be better. This was a tragedy, and this was a horrifying moment in our history, in the crusade for gay rights and equal rights, and yet people came together to make this incredible thing. There are great little cameos, and some of the artists and writers bring in established DC characters. There is certainly one of the most memorable standout pieces in here is a 2-pager of Batman examining the crime scene and trying to make sense of it, and you see bodies, and you see him kind of in full-on detective mode, and the last panel is a few cops outside the club saying, "I hear he's in there. He's the greatest detective. If he can't figure out why this happened, nobody can." And of course, even Batman is stumped in this situation. So it was a really profound thing. I encourage everybody to check it out. The proceeds of it are supporting the survivors of the Orlando Pulse shooting. And it was really, like I said, I fell into it because I'm a fan of Mark Andreyko, and I think he did an incredible thing here, bringing all these people together for this powerful bit of artwork. So that's the first episode of this anime and comics discovery show that I'm putting together here. Let me know in the comments what you think I should check out in the worlds of anime or comics, be it anime shows, particular episodes, highlights, anime film, comics in terms of specific runs I should look at. I've been your host, Trevor Starkey. You can follow me at SnarkyStarkey on Twitter. And until next time, from here at the Trove, treasure your friends.